This is information about mindfulness meditation for colitis, for Crohn's, and for people that have irritable bowel syndrome. So my name is Scott Rauer, and I am trained as a clinical psychologist, a meditation teacher, and I also personally have Crohn's disease. This picture is me back a couple of years after I first got my diagnosis. I was in my mid-20s, and I was in an overseas trip in Europe, and I was trying to live it up in my mid to early 20s. And unfortunately, this is a pretty awful time in my life, even though um, I was young and on an awesome vacation. I had been diagnosed with Crohn's a couple of years earlier, but in hindsight, I was mostly in denial at that point and trying to not let it affect me, not really making a lot of the changes that really were being called for at that time. And over the course of these 12 or 13 years, I've learned a lot of things about how to put my Crohn's in remission. And this is me now with my baby. And being a father, now especially, it's been crucial for me to be on top of my health to make sure it's not getting in the way of uh, parenting and working my job and doing all the things that I want to do in life. So part of what I want to make this video about is because there are three M's of a stable base that I have found that really work for me to keep um, uh, flares to a minimum and keep my disease in remission. So the first two are pretty obvious: moderated diet and medication. I personally take Remicade, which is an immunosuppressant biologic drug, and these two are crucial for me, essential. Without these two, I'm really not doing well. But these two alone, for me at least, I found are not enough. When I added mindfulness meditation practice, a daily practice into my life, things really kicked in. Um, and this has been my stable base, kind of like a tripod. If I'm not on top of one of these three, then the whole thing is crashing down. So there's a lot of information about the first two, but not as much about the third for Crohn's, colitis, and IBS. So that's what I'm here to try and help with. So why mindfulness for GI problems? This quote is from a mainstream GI Western GI journal, and it says, "There's no doubt that stress is a triggering and exacerbating factor in relation to the course and symptoms of IBD. Indeed, it can be considered one of the determinants of disease relapse." So there's no mincing of words here. It's saying that stress is a triggering factor, it's an exacerbating factor when it comes to IBD, and it should be considered one of the main determinants of relapse of any of these disorders. And this is even more so the case, even more clear when it comes to IBS. So the idea that stress is important it should be considered within a certain framework, with this idea that IBS and IBD are not just gut disorders. They are disorders of the brain, gut, microbiome axis. These three parts of the body, systems of the body, all interact with each other. It's a two-way street. So stress negatively impacts this whole entire system in four main ways. Number one, it shuts down digestion. When you're feeling stressed, that fight or flight, that activation of the nervous system shuts down digestion. Number two, intestinal permeability increases, leaky gut syndrome. Number three, inflammation will increase. And then number four is, in reaction to all this stress and with your symptoms getting worse because the inflammation, the leaky gut, and the digestion are increasing, it's going to lead you to likely be more in a reactive mode. And being reactive entails making short-term decisions based on short-term consequences. So using food for emotional eating and emotional feeling better, let's say, rather than what's going to be helpful for your disorder, your gut. Drinking, smoking, not exercising, all these things that are likely going to help you feel better in the moment, but are going to keep things going. So this is a bit of the vicious cycle of how stress kicks things in and makes things worse in the end, because that stress has that biological impact. That biological impact causes us to psychologically and emotionally react in short-term with short-term coping. Short-term coping has a downside to it, causes more stress, and this can be a vicious cycle that just increasing. So this is where mindfulness really kicks in. Mindfulness is an active practice to help stabilize the mind. And like we were saying before, this microbiome, gut, and brain axis is a two-way street. So the mind will follow the body, and the body will also follow the mind. So if you're training your mind to handle stress in a more skilled way, training your mind to become less bowled over by the stressors of life, then it's going to really impact your system. And there's more and more research that's starting to kind of bolster this and prove this to be true. I can just speak from my own experience. Um, One last thing here is this is something that very easily can become something that you should be doing, something you feel like you should be doing, or reading about that you should be doing, like exercising more and having a better diet. And now let's add on, you should be meditating every day. And that's just not a helpful, it's not a helpful perspective. It's not going to lead you to stick with this for the long term. So thankfully, there's a much easier and much more enjoyable way of doing this. And I'm here to help people with IBS, Crohn's, and colitis that are interested in learning about these practices and learning with other people that have shared struggles as well.